Back in the day, probably about 7, 8 years ago, maybe a little less, I had a YouTube channel I called the Cuckoo Report. Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo report. And this was my hat. I called myself Germanglish, speaking both German and English in the Cuckoo Report. I spoke like the German who's speaking English. Anyway, I had this hat, and this is the a reproduction of the Venus of Willendorf. It is actually as precise as you could possibly get in terms of an actual reproduction of this so-called 30,000-year-old figurine, this little figure. I think there were a lot of them, but this one has been handed down in my Fukushima shirt, the Destroyer of Worlds, continuously coming us via the nuclear industry, the Destroyer of Worlds, the archetypal character that is represented in Oppenheimer's quote. When he saw the bomb go off, he said, now I've become Death, Destroyer of Worlds. Well, very apropos. We are now with Oppenheimer gave us Fukushima. I'm in no way taking this lightly, but obviously when we understand things, there is a kind of balance in taking this, not in the Buddhist sense. I'm not at all even close to the Buddhist concept of existence. But there's a balance to being able to survive and live without going absolutely bonkers, crazy, nuts, batshit crazy, because you realize, holy cow, how could this ever have occurred? How could this have happened? Well, how this could have happened, there are many reasons that you could go into why we are in the situation that we're in. And certain people have always understood this. There is an understanding about existence and the reality we experience within a concept of what is real meaning. What is real meaning? Something that actually really means something when we're engaged, when we're engaging people, or just reflecting on ourselves. What is true meaning? What is real? What is something that makes so much sense and is so important? What is that? What is that? Which is why I'm going to continue with my reflections on beauty. Beauty, people, beauty. Something that has been, somehow it has, for some reason, it has been usurped by a contingent of people among us who found it necessary to distract us from what it actually means to experience beauty. And there have been artists in history that have focused on this concept, maybe not specifically saying, I'm going to make something beautiful. Frankly, I don't think that's possible. Beauty is part of an experience that is quite ephemeral from the point of view of being able to quantify it and say, well, if I do this, it'll be beautiful. The Renaissance is a good example of this. They tried to quantify beauty by creating what is called the golden section, the ratio of things, how something fits together. Check out my last video. I talked a little bit about this in terms of the Vitruvian Man and creating a context for something that can be reproduced that is beautiful. Well, it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I've got bad news for all the artists out there that are actually thinking that they're creating beautiful things. Like if you're doing a watercolor and you've understood the medium and you're doing something, it has semblances of beauty, but it really is limited when we're not in contact with something that is much more profound and not based on a formula. It's not, like I say, creativity is not rehearsed. You cannot rehearse something and reproduce it and then say, well, I've discovered the meaning of the universe in terms of beauty and I'm going to do it over and over again. You would probably have people screaming to you. And if it was, which is something that the owners figure that they have understood how to manipulate this, they create a culture, a world around us, wittingly or unwittingly, that is considered through ritual quite often to be beautiful. And it's not, has nothing to do with beauty. No, has nothing to do with beauty. In my cuckoo report hat with the Venus, the original version of beauty, and someone like this that looked like this, I think in present day culture, it wouldn't really go over very well on the walk. The models, the anorexic models that represent modern day beauty. If you look at these poor creatures, these anorexic, skinny little creatures walking on the walk, displaying themselves, letting the oligarchs and the owners have their laugh, have their fun, how they've been able to totally derail any sense of a true connection to something that is beautiful, a female form. If you're a straight person, there is quite a bit of energy derived out of the beauty that you see in the female form. Artists have focused on this, especially check out Courbet, who had this, I think he understood this very well. Courbet, as an artist, had understood what it is to represent something in a picture that's beautiful. But today, what I'm going to briefly or not so briefly go into is the idea of beauty as it relates to the soul. And a lot of people, if you're a religious type, you're going to attach yourself to the idea of a soul because religion says there's a God, and the God thing is like, obviously it's not proven, or it's kind of like this thing that happens to us that's called faith, and faith allows us to intellectually connect to some sort of concept that satisfies this need to express or explain something that is quite simple and straightforward, but we create elaborate systems, biblical stories and Upanishads and Mahabharatas and Bhagavad Gitas and Hebrew scriptures, Christian scriptures, all over the place to justify why we know there is something called a soul. And beauty is actually a kind of pathway or doorway to this understanding, without all the peripheral stuff that has been collected around it. If you go to the Vatican, I have not been, I want to go, I want to see the ceiling, I want to see, I've seen the reproductions, but this whole elaborate system of beauty is constructed in order for us to be diverted from truly knowing this within ourselves, because ultimately that's what it's all about. And I'm talking about each individual person having a life, having experiences. Who gives a shit about what anybody else is experiencing? It's about you. It's about you. This is what I go on about. It's about you. You're the most important person on the planet, and at any given time. Never ever doubt this. You are the most important person on the planet at any given time. It doesn't mean someone else is not valuable, important, meaningful to you. It just means that we need, each one of us, come to terms with this conceptual part within us that is not meat and potatoes. You can, you hit. It's like something that is very real, but you can't really identify it except through. And there's different ways I'll go into, but the idea of beauty, I've been wanting to do this whole thing on beauty for such a long time, being a painter and having a sensibility around what it means to put together an image on a two-dimensional surface that communicates this aspect of soul. And I'm not thinking about beauty, but beauty is a vehicle toward this. And this gets a little bit deeper now, obviously, because when you're talking about the what is referred to in religions quite often as spirit, this invokes the concept of soul. And how is it that we can actually identify within ourselves something that is real, that can't be proven or can't be touched, or whatever that physical experience allows us to be a part of, but doesn't actually give us access on the level that would basically diminish the control over us practiced in culture and ritual and all that kind of stuff. You see, we're completely caught in behaviors that are not our own. This is the idea of culture, that we adapt and we adopt behavior and ideas, philosophies, no matter what, how far back you go, from even Plato, or if you go to, these kind of figurations. This needs to be experienced. This cannot be observed primarily. This has to be experienced. The relationship that I have to art and art history is something that you have to experience. And I chose to be a painter because I think innately I felt that I needed to experience what it is that this person experienced when they were doing this way back when, 30,000 years ago. And I'm sure it goes way past that. And I don't even think this was 30,000 years ago. It's probably a lot less, it's a lot more recent, most likely. I'm not going to go into dates here because it may alienate some people. Okay, so this is a continuation of the idea of beauty. Concepts that promote our conviction, our understanding of spirit and soul. And many people attach themselves, if you look at within the YouTube genre, you have like Bible thumping, dogmatic types pounding away at some kind of dogma that is supposed to instill it in your brain. It's like, taking something that squeezes it in wherever there's a hole in your body, squeeze it in, whatever, that kind of a feeling. Well, that's not how it works. It's by agreement. It's by compliance. It's by subtleties of our acceptance that we actually transform ourselves to have a solid notion of what it means to be part of spirit. It's important. We need to understand we are part of. We're not isolated. We are part of. Once we have this sensibility awaken in us, and it's not a fait accompli. It's not over. Oh, I've got it. Goodbye. Adios. Let's die. It's finished. No, it's not like this. It's a growing process into this awareness, into this ability for each one of us to be more convinced every day. Now, in my earlier first video, I said beauty is connected to the rightness of something. The rightness of something meaning that, what's another word? There's a feeling of, there's a feeling of elegance, which means it's not related necessarily to a physical sensibility. It's more of an ephemeral thing, the elegance of something. If you see, last night I went to a performance of modern dance by a fabulous group. They're not extraordinary in a historical sense of dancers. They're younger dancers, but they exemplified a connection to this ephemeral part. They were beautiful, and they came up with imaginative scenes on stage that they danced to that evoked within me this sensibility of spirit. I felt a connection in some form or other. When people clap a lot, what does that mean? I was whistling and clapping at the end of it because I felt a connection with these people, and they were very appreciative. And they instilled within me the sensibility I observed through what I understand to be beauty, but more importantly, this aspect of the spirit that they were transmitting through the work that they had done and were doing and were showing me. There was a particular scene where they worked with a light bulb. These dancers were working with a light bulb that was on a long string hanging from the rafters, from the ceiling. And it was just fucking extraordinary the way they made it. They created a relationship. Obviously, it was a light on a string, but the light and the movement, and it's difficult to explain who had this idea. It was almost transcendental. Once you push yourself into a position of total belief. I was in a complete state of total belief. I had no ability to judge what was going on. I was part of what was going on stage. I found that to be quite extraordinary. And this is from a group of people that were in their early 20s. They were learning how to dance, but they had managed to capture me completely. Fabulous, just fabulous. I'll put a link. I don't know. Yeah, I'll put a link on the bottom of this so you can research them. I wish them all the best, and I hope they go as far as they can go with the art that they're producing. But anyway, my thoughts today, my interest today is to start and connect this in my reflections on this, to start to bridge the idea of beauty grounded in a rightness of something, whichever way you experience that. I'm not going to tell you what it should be. I mean, if you look at a combination of colors, what you see behind me, you may actually relate to that from a point of view of beauty. You may feel the beauty in it, but what you're actually perceiving is my ability to connect with you through spirit, this idea of soul. If you want to go to the top level of this in human consciousness, it's a God consciousness. The godness of something is represented in beauty. So we're using, what I'm saying is this concept of beauty is not isolated to itself. It is in connection to something that we feel within inside ourselves that connects us to. That's what I'm saying. So beauty, spirit, soul is an experience that fundamentally makes us feel connected. So here's my point. Here's what I'm saying. For all those atheists who doubt there is like okay, you live, you die, you're gone, you're mush, you're like worm food, whatever it is, maggots take you over. Well, this is totally contrary to what it is in recognizing everyday experiences that for the most part are lost to us because we need to work on it. We need to think about this. We need to reflect on it. If you want, you can even call it meditation or prayer. I'm not big on those terms because I think, again, they're hijacked. They take us away from something. It's a very simple kind of thing. Like I said, I experienced the connectedness to the people on stage that were producing something so extraordinary that communicated soul and spirit. Is God alive? You're bloody right. The God feeling is alive and well when you go through this process, through beauty, to find this connection. And it's connected to the rightness of something. I didn't think about any specific physical phenomena that was going on. Obviously, they were dancing, the movements, all that kind of stuff. But it started to transcend the physical world, even though it was happening. It was a vehicle towards me appreciating something that made me feel connected. Isn't this what the owners always try to do? They hijack that connection to their story. It's always about their story. When you're listening to YouTubers analyzing our existence, it's valuable up to a point, but you're always in the headlights of their story. We have to find a story that actually connects us to something that is meaningful and real to us, because the dysfunction out there is not a connection to the soul, to the godness. The dysfunction is not, because it's not on the rightness of things, right? Right? So this is what I'm saying. This is what I'm, in this particular dissertation, what I want to clarify as I proceed through this, I guess, a kind of rationalization about the phenomenon that we understand to be beauty. It's not a poem written by some fellow. It's not the physical moment of the experience. It's the connection to that, what it is you're experiencing. It's not just hearing the sounds or seeing the colors in an extracted or in an exterior sense. It's an inner experience that relies on our ability to actually internalize something truly. And how do you internalize this? Through a feeling of connectedness. This is important. So in this, I think I'll end it here. I think I've expressed what it is I wanted to say about beauty, the soul, the spirit, the godness of something. And using the words diminishes it to the extent that it invokes a baggage that has built on us for, well, in our own lifetime, and also a baggage carried through in culture, what I call the culture of death. The baggage that comes with culture builds on us. Even unwittingly, we absorb it. I've understood this through my own history as a Roman Catholic. We absorb shit we can't get rid of. I'm still getting rid of all this stuff out of my psyche, eliminating all these erroneous concepts that just creep up on me. It's like the judgment of something. Like last night again, I was sitting there, I started off feeling very judgmental, saying, whatever it was I was saying, and it dissipated as soon as I began to feel the connection. And they didn't have to be Rudolf Nureyev or Margot Fontaine or Karen Kane, the dancers. They were just themselves within their expertise that they had worked on themselves to transmit this amazing thing, this feeling that allowed me to connect to what it is who they were. And they were kind of stunned at the end of it, because the entire audience were just clapping their heads off. They didn't know what had happened to them, especially in this town. It's Sarnia. Sarnia is in Ontario. It's Chemical Valley. They're killing everything in this town. This town is a brutal place. From the point of view of giving people the ability to survive, it has the highest heart disease in all of Canada, because people are subjecting themselves to all the toxicities that are being released by the Chemical Valley. But people were shocked that they could actually feel something of significance and value to them, other than going and making a paycheck and going home and sleeping. So encapsulating what I'm saying is that beauty, this experience that we have, leads us very directly to the notion what is scorned by contemporary science or thinkers. Not all of them, but most of them say this is irrelevant, like Carl Sagan. When you die, there's nothing. This is Carl Sagan's mantra. You die, you go away into nothingness. He was the big proponent. He had a big argument with Thurman, Richard Thurman, is it? The Buddhist type, who said to him very cleverly, he said, well, Carl, if all you can conceive of is something, how can you even present me with the notion of nothing? Nothing is incapable. We're incapable of conceiving of nothing. It's not possible. So how can you be a proponent of nothing if all we can conceive of is something? You see, we're very clever on Thurman's part. But he's part of the culture. He's like that controlled opposition character type in. If you read him, you'll see what I mean. He's controlled opposition. Anyway, I think I'll end it here, and I'll post this.